Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Happy Valentine's Day, and thanks so much for tuning in and spending part of your lovely day with me. We're going to be talking today about love. I mean, right now we couldn't have really a better day to talk about it, but in the world, just look at the last 2 years and what we've all dealt with and faced. The anger, the outrage, the isolationism, the aggression. I mean, just walk out, drive your car around town, like it's all there. It's a palpable energy. You know, what's won the day these past 2 years is fear and aggression and anger. And those are the opposite of love. And remember, when you're living and making decisions in fear, anger, and aggression, you're not healing, you're not repairing, you're not reaching your full human potential of health, and it doesn't serve you. And so I know many of you are angry. You've been angry because we've been lied to, because we've been isolated, because we've had our freedoms taken away. And there's nothing wrong with being and having the emotion of anger. So I don't want to say you're wrong for having that feeling. I want to emphasize tonight that the way forward is not to harbor that anger. The way forward is not to try to exact vengeance on someone, something. It's really the way forward is to get your mind and your philosophy and your ideas around what love can actually do to help you heal. As it says in the good book, the Lord says, "Vengeance is mine." Don't plan your vengeance. That doesn't belong to you, and it only helps to serve you in a destructive way. So again, let's talk about love, because I really believe that love is the ultimate answer to your health problems. Now, before we dive into that, I just want to share a story with you. This was sent to me by one of our listeners and readers, Danielle, and I share this story because it's just such an amazing transformation. Right now, we're getting ready to come. Well, we've got a couple weeks left, and we're wrapping up the No Grain, No Pain competition. But again, this is one of the winners, or I shouldn't say one of the winners, but one of the people that's in contention for winning. So this is from Danielle. I've suffered from multiple bouts of migrant joint pain and debilitating back pain, often since I was 15. The last few years, progressively, the pain got worse. My doctor finally took an x-ray of my back, and it showed that a 35-year-old had stage 4 osteoarthritis of my facet joints. After lots of pain pills and still no relief from my back and pelvic pain, the next step was my OB-GYN to see if my endometriosis had returned. Of course, you don't know that until you get in there. So as you can imagine, a hysterectomy was on the docket at 36 years of age. My OB-GYN said, although there were no signs of endometriosis, it appeared the uterus might be taking up space and leaning on areas of my back that are causing pain. So he went ahead with the hysterectomy. Could you imagine? After healing from that, I still had continuous hip and back pain that wrapped around to the front with no explanation. Next visit would be to see an orthopedic surgeon. An MRI revealed a bulging disc. Between a bulging disc and my osteoarthritis, they also assumed that my hip pain was from bursitis, maybe stemming from the 2 other diagnoses. They wanted to do injections, but I chose to wait it out. Later that year, I started noticing problems swallowing my food. My food was just not going down the right way. Off to another doctor, this time to do a barium swallow study and an endoscopy, which would reveal an esophageal motility disorder, again, still 37 years of age. Doctors wanted to give me reflux medicine as my reflux was out of control, as well as some sort of medicine to help with swallowing, but said that I would never be able to fully digest food the proper way because of the way my esophagus was moving. The endoscopy also revealed chronic inflammation that was unexplained. December 1st, 2021, I walked into my doctor's office and sat down to explain to him that I almost can't feel the entire left side of my body. My joints ache. I wake up daily with back pain, sometimes debilitating. I can hardly swallow food, and so far, I have no specific answers. He was at a loss, but then decided to test me for autoimmunity, specifically lupus, which then also wound up being negative. Tearfully, I told my husband that I've got to figure something out. He said these words, "What are you doing every single day that may be contributing to your pain? Maybe it's your food." I was so skeptical, but decided anything was worth a try. At the time, I was drinking and eating multiple servings of sugar substitutes and had been doing that since I was 15 years old. That was the one thing I knew that I did habitually every day. that, and I was eating lots of gluten as well as semi-processed foods. I stumbled across your book, No Grain, No Pain, and decided to give it a try. I am now 3 weeks in, and from about day 5, no longer have any back or hip pain. My digestion and swallowing have gotten better. I had rashes and hives on my body that were unexplained and kept coming back. They have disappeared and have not returned. This has been life-changing for me, and I will continue. I am hopeful that my story may help another 30-something-year-old who has unexplained chronic pain find some sort of relief. Please keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for giving this information. So just a very, very wonderful outcome, a very fantastic story of a skeptic, applying the diet change and finding real solutions, right? There's no solutions on a surgical table. Your uterus and ovaries aren't too big and pushing into your spine or your back. That's just not the way God created your body. And to me, that was a ridiculous notion. But so many people go through this where they have a painful situation. Their trip is through multiple different doctors' offices. The answer largely is drugs and surgery. And largely drugs and surgery don't have positive outcomes. We've known that, for decades, for years. But so many doctors completely neglect their patients because they don't look at diet as a potential downfall. They don't look at diet as an inducer of inflammation, as an inducer of arthritic inflammation, right? They don't think that what you put here is going to affect your joints, it's going to affect your back, and they're wrong. And so I share Danielle's story with you to give you hope. I also want to thank Danielle. Danielle, thank you so much for having the courage to write in to us at Gluten Free Society to share that wonderful story of triumph over not only your issue, but also over the skepticism of diet change. So thank you for being brave enough to embark on No Grain, No Pain. And that being said, let's talk about love, right? So if we ultimately look at what love is self-truth. Probably one of the most important components to love is starting here. I get this a lot when people, and we've seen a lot of this over the past 2 years, is people don't start from the premise of honesty, self-honesty. Self-honesty or self-truth is the number one form. It's where love starts, because if you lie to yourself, you're already not loving yourself. To think about love as the way you would want others to treat you, right? If you want others to be honest with you, if you want others to respect you and to give you the freedom to make your own choices, the truth has to come first. And so many people in today's world will try to sell you a fake bill of goods. They don't talk about truth so much as they talk about what they want you to believe is the truth, right? So it's a coercion, if you will. And we see this a lot. Really over the past couple of years, what the truth has actually been. But love is truth. And so we start, right, by looking at ourselves in the mirror, right? Because if we don't look at ourselves in the mirror, like the mirror reveals a lot of truths, but starting with self-honesty. So how many of you today that are tuning in today cheat on your diet? How many of you know that you should exercise more but don't? How many of you know that you embark into relationships that don't bring you joy but actually bring you tremendous grief? How many of you don't get enough sleep? How many of you don't exercise at all? How many of you overconsume sugar or drink alcohol on a regular basis, to numb the truth of what you're experiencing in your life? Again, no judgment coming from me, but again, what I'm trying to do is to encourage you to be honest with yourself, because no progress can occur, zero progress can occur if what you're telling yourself is a falsehood, right? So how do you begin change? How do you begin making change? Is that you're honest with yourself about what's happening in your life. So the truth is love. And the most important thing you can do is be honest with yourself, because self-honesty is self-love, right? It's crucial. You can't love yourself and lie to yourself at the same time, at least not fully. And so your outcomes will be diminished and you'll struggle, right? So this brings me to another point here, which is self-love. We live in this society, it's really, I don't know, the best way I can describe society today Up is down and down is up, right? We're told lies directly to our face, even though every fiber in our being tells us differently. We tend to want to believe the lie. And one of the lies is that to love yourself is selfish, right? So this whole premise of being selfish, in my opinion, is overrated, because self-love starts with having boundaries. I'm not talking about being selfish, like ignoring others who need you at the cost of serving something in vanity. I'm talking about being selfish is in taking care of yourself first, because this is especially true of women, but I shouldn't really say it's especially true of women. It's true of women because the power women have over men. And celebrating this day of love, I think it's important to honor that women are the heart of the home, right? And any intelligent man who's married and has been married for any length of time could probably reiterate a number of phrases that say this without saying it. For example, happy wife, happy life, right? But to not be too cliche, a woman is the heart of the home. And so if a woman is self-sacrificing her time, her efforts, her energy, right, and she's taking damage herself to meet the needs of everyone else who are not meeting her halfway to meet their own needs, that's what we call a bad relationship. Now, it's not so much that a mom can't take care of her children. So kids are different. We put kids in a different category. Children are different in that regard, because mothers will have just an overpowering instinctual love for their children, right? And they will do anything. They will sacrifice anything to make sure that their kids aren't wanting for something, or their kids are safe. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about ignoring your children at your own vanity, at your own purposes, at your own designs. You have to take care of your children. They're your responsibility. What I'm talking about is lying to yourself about what your obligations actually are. And I'm going to give some just very specific examples to help you understand. So one example I get very frequently in the clinic is there's a mom, she's chronically sick. She's got 3 or 4 different autoimmune diagnoses. She's staying at home to take care of her family. And her husband, she's fortunate because her husband does well enough that she can do that. But she's got 3 children, and all of her children are involved in school, but they're also involved in extracurricular activities outside of school. And this mother, she spends her entire day taking care of everyone else. And at the end of the day, she's not taking care of herself, right? So I get this again, no exercise, no sunshine, not sleeping at the proper times, eating poorly, and then medicating for happiness, or for mood, for depression or whatever it might be, mood abnormalities. And so understanding that if this is you and you're watching this, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this, not even for your kids. And here's what I mean by that. Your children depend on you, and they watch you. They look at you. You are the shining beacon of light and hope and the example for them. And so if you're spending your days depriving yourself of fundamental basic needs, again, these are fundamental basic needs: exercise, sunshine, sleep, and diet. We can't get around that. And medicines, which are a lie, right? Medicines are a form for most people. I'm not going to say all medicines are bad or evil, but medicines for most people are a form of this right here. They're a form of self-lying, because what you're really saying is, I'm going to take this drug to depress the symptoms, to depress my body's early warning detection system that's trying to tell me to make a change, but I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to lie to myself. I'm going to mask it so that I can overcome the fact that I'm not doing these things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice myself in my mind, right, for the sake of my kids or my, fill in the blank, my kids, my husband, my relationship, or whatever that might be. And so this is a lie, right? And you have to acknowledge that. That's why, again, going back to truth being the most important thing you can tell yourself as you set up. And remember that whether you're a mom or whether you're a father, you lead by example. If you've got kids, they're watching you. And if you don't have kids, let's say you don't have kids, or your kids are all grown up, your spouse is watching you, right? You are a leader to your spouse. A wife is a leader for her husband. A husband is a leader for his wife. And if you're setting poor examples, right, you're saying it's okay to not do these things with your actions. And again, all on the I would call the altar, right, of not being called selfish. So we go back to this term selfishness, as if selfishness is somehow taking care of yourself, right? When did we go from taking care of ourselves to being, selfish? When did that translation occur in our society? It has occurred, right? At this point, I mean, you can see it, especially in our culture. You see, there's more discussion toward. I'm trying not to get political here, but there's more discussion toward communistic thought processes, right? What's good for the whole, right, should trump what's good for the one. And I would argue that what's good for the whole, it's not for the one, it's not for the individual, right, to look out for the whole. That, to a certain extent, it's to the individual to look out for themselves and lead by example. And as a general rule, if you do that, the whole around you, the community around you, will see you lead by example. They will see and hopefully try to emulate or achieve the same level of success that you are achieving within your health. But if you lie to yourself and you sacrifice yourself on the altar, right, of perceived selfishness, then what ends up happening is your health is destroyed and you have nothing left. Remember, your health is your wealth. Your health is your health, your physical health. Your body is your temple, and that physical status of your temple is your ability to navigate this world. And if you destroy it, you can't buy it back. You can't get it back. You can't jump in a time machine, go backwards, and do things differently once you've done them. Now, you can always make changes moving forward, but you can't go back in time. And so you have to get very, very clear on being honest to yourself about whether or not you're doing the things, again, that society would say are selfish, but I would argue that society is mad, right? We truly live in Alice in Wonderlandian-like times, and up is down and down is up, and everybody would have you believe the lie. And you have to, in order to keep your health, you literally have to step outside of the way society is moving. And you have to have the strength and the courage to say, I'm not going to follow that crowd. That crowd is dangerous. That crowd is the mob, right? And the mob is fickle, and you don't want to be a part of that. So again, self-love is not selfishness. Self-love is a necessity. And if you, again, ladies, heart of the home, if you aren't doing this, I can promise you your kids are suffering needlessly. Your husband is suffering needlessly. And likewise, men, if you are not doing this, your wives and your children are also suffering needlessly. You have to lead by example, and that example is not selfishness. Taking care of yourself is not selfishness. It is establishing patterns and behaviors that will transcend you to multiple generations to come. So don't fall prey to that mentality. And that brings us to this point, because if you are, what ends up happening is nobody is a worse critic than you, right? The worst critic about what you do and how you navigate the world is generally you, right? You don't need somebody else to point out your fallacies, your flaws, your mistakes. Generally, you're doing that, thousands of times a day in your own head. And so what happens if you get stuck back here, right? If you get stuck back here, right, this is where a lot of people end up needing the medication. Why? Because their health is so deteriorated. Remember, when your physical health is deteriorated, your mind, your brain is deteriorating, and it's affecting the way that you think. And this is where you can get stuck in this vicious pattern of self-critiquing to such a degree that it creates a positive feedback loop, not positive in a good way, but a positive feedback loop where you're constantly critiquing yourself, knowing that you should be doing something different, yet not looking at the truth to acknowledge what that is, continuing to give yourself the excuse that if you were to do the things that you needed to do, you would somehow be selfish because that's what society is telling you. And then you end up in self-deprecation, criticizing yourself all the time, and you don't want to be there either. And so this is why so many people medicate, right? This is where medicine makes it all less obvious, right? It blunts the senses, it dulls the senses, it allows you to continue to perpetuate a lie to yourself. And again, I'm not saying that medicine is never helpful or that it can never be useful. There certainly can be times there where it is. But for the most part, if you're starting with the falsehood, right? If you're starting with multiple falsehoods and you're not being honest with yourself about what it takes to be healthy and what it requires, remember that your freedoms aren't free. They come with an obligation that you have to fulfill your part of the bargain. And so there's 7 what we would call non-negotiable fundamentals of self-love. And so the first is you have to eat well. Number 1, eating well. Number 2 is sleeping well. Number 3 is spending time outdoors, outside, connecting with our planet, right? Connecting with it. And number 4 is good sleep, right? Getting adequate sleep. Number 5 is clean air. Number 6 is clean water. And number 7 is stress management, mitigating the stress around you. And there's a lot of an abundance of that in these last couple of years, again, because society has moved away from love and they've moved into anger, fear, resentment, as a means, right, to move through the world. And you can't move through the world using those emotions as your primary decision drivers, because those are just going to keep you angry. They're just going to keep you angry. And they're going to make you want to do things like dope your mind out so that you can't feel. And when you can't feel, how can you love, right? When you suppress what your body is capable of experiencing emotionally, how can you deliver the love to others that they deserve? How can you shine as a beacon of love for others to follow if you aren't loving yourself because you're lying to yourself? So again, it goes back to that fundamental. So being your own worst critic, what does that lead to? It leads to a lot of this: depression and anger, right? And internal mind bargaining. So you start bargaining with yourself about this, about medicine. So again, not a good place to be. And then, what that can do is it affects our emotional health, right? And when our emotional health, when we're beating ourselves up inside on a regular basis, our emotional health starts to suffer, and our ability to give emotionally to others we don't want to do it, right? Because we don't have enough for ourselves, and so now we feel like we have to escape the madness, and that's what the medicine does. It allows you to escape it, but not really. It just really allows you, again, it allows you to numb it. So emotional and mental nourishment. Now, one of the best places I see people start here, I said there were 7 fundamentals, right? So you got exercise, you got spending time outside. This is a different kind of fundamental, but that's in educating yourself, right? You see the woman here with the book is self-education, right? Improving upon your knowledge, right? You have a brain. God didn't put you here to stop growing because you're an adult. Just because you no longer grow physically doesn't mean that you can't continue to grow spiritually, can't continue to improve upon your intelligence quotient, right? Your IQ, as a result of learning, right? So many people stop learning, and what do? They expect people to tell them what to do, right? In our world today, a big part of this emotional and mental lack of emotional and mental nourishment comes with something we call decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is, in today's world, you are faced with infinitely more decisions every day that you need to make than your parents had to make and that your grandparents had to make, right? I mean, just let's just take one small example, right? If we go to a store, if we're shopping, right? Generally today, we can buy anything that we want at any given moment in time, have it delivered in 24 hours, right? So let's just use clothes as an example. We have to select from a multitude of different sizes, a multitude of different colors, a multitude of different fashions, right? We have all these decisions that are going through our mind. Subconsciously, we don't even realize that we're making hundreds of decisions constantly, right? But we're bombarded by this, right? Just go to the grocery store and look at all the different decisions. You know, you can buy 87,000 types of soap, right? And this one is good for acne plus dry skin, and this one is good for dry skin, but not good for acne, but it's good for oily skin too, right? You've got all these decisions that you're chronically having to make, and that decision fatigue, it wears you down, right? It wears you down emotionally, and so then you start relying on people to feed you information instead of you making decisions because you're so decision fatigued in other ways that you, again, you're relying on others to make those for you, or at least to tell you what to do, right? So to be told what to do and not think about whether it's the right thing, the wrong thing, or the good thing. You're just following, right? And so that, again, these last 2 years, it's all been about following, right? Following the herd. Well, guess what? The herd was wrong in the biggest way that you could possibly be wrong, to the detriment of everyone, all because people didn't want to be honest. Right? And they struggled with this before the event occurred, right? And so now this was just the tipping point. They were already brewing and boiling over here, and now you throw in anger, fear, and if it's mortal fear especially, then decisions just go completely out the window. And so decision fatigue is just obliterated, and now what you're left with is just tell me what to do. Please, just tell me what to do. And you can't live your life that way and expect yourself to be happy and radiate or resonate any type of love where people are going to, where you're going to be able to heal or where others will be able to heal. Now, one of the other big places that people go wrong in my experience with this is in their relationships, is they surround themselves with people who they shouldn't surround themselves with. I mean, if we're following kind of a same theme, this is people that have no business making decisions in your life or helping you be a better, more emotionally loving person, right? Because this is all either sex or fear, right? They're appealing to base emotion. They're not appealing to logic. They're not appealing to love. They're appealing to base emotion. And that's what sells, right? This is what sells. And so if these are the relationships that you carry on a daily basis, I know a lot of you, and I'm guilty of it too. At least I used to be, of this one, right? Especially this one. What does it do? It just feeds you anger, right? It feeds you anger. It feeds you a loss of sense of control. And it deters you. It deters you from engaging in real relationships, because understand that this is not a relationship. This is a one-way piping of propaganda more than anything else. And so your relationships suffer because, again, you're constantly here. You can't think, right? The limbic part of your brain takes over and fight or flight kicks in. And this is why people a lot of times are unhealthy today, is because they're living in the limbic brain. They don't digest their food well. They can't get nourished by their food. They don't sleep well because their sleep is disturbed because, again, they're living in constant fear. And so they never even get to access or engage the love mechanism, which is best engaged in a state of calmness, right? In a state of peace and inner awareness and environmental awareness around you, as opposed to, again, all of this is reactionary. You react, right? So that reactionary is not thinking. And so where we make our best mistakes, our worst mistakes, is here, right? How many of you, raise your hand, how many of you have ever in anger or in high emotion, have ever said something you didn't mean, or really hurt somebody that you weren't really trying to hurt, but you were so emotional it just came out as a weapon? If that's happened to you, raise your hand, right? It's happened to all of us. I'll raise my hand because it's a reactionary mindset. And so, again, in this past year, we've allowed our relationships to be trumped by fear propaganda, pumping machines, as opposed to real human relationships. And this is, again, I started out earlier saying, get out on the road today and feel the rage. People are driving around. They're not kind. They're not courteous. This is a very, very different world than it was 2 years ago. Why? Because the relationships have been hijacked by pseudo relationships, fear porn. And so you've got to get back to loving relationships. And maybe it's not this for you. Maybe you already turned this off. Maybe just, maybe you're smart enough to have already done that. In many cases where I see this too is relationships and family and friends. And that's not to say, get rid of all your family and get rid of all your friends who you don't agree with. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just simply saying that, what does it require to be in a relationship? Number one, it requires love, right? You have to have patience, and you have to have love for that person that you're in a relationship with. But I would say as well, it requires something that we all have very little of, right? So what is the number one requirement? It requires time, right? And, depending on your age, you might see this differently, but time is the number one non-renewable resource that each of you have, right? And it's fleeting. And it comes and it goes, and before you know it, more has passed than what you have left. And so if you're trying to evaluate, this right here, your relationships with family and friends, and you have, you've all had a relationship. We've all had a relationship like this because we all have family or friends that have been this way at any given moment in our lives. But in some relationships, you have what I like to call vampires. These are the people that you're not really in a relationship with, but all they do is take. The perfect classic example in psychology is the narcissist, right? Is they take your time, they take your resource, they take from you without giving back, right? So it's not really a relationship in the sense of a balanced relationship. It's more of like a parasitic relationship. And so again, remember, this is they steal this, right? They're thieves of this, and you don't want your non-renewable resource to be taken from you. So sometimes you have to evaluate where you're at here. And again, I'm not saying to ostracize your family or friends, but I'm saying evaluate with your heart and with your mind, and say, are you surrounding yourself with people who are kind of friends, or people who are more acquaintances but not true friends, right? And in this past couple of years, I know a lot of you maybe have discovered that about people that you cared about as you've come into this relationship burden where you've hit a place of irreconcilable differences, and so you're reevaluating some of this already. But remember that your relationships are super important, because if these are loving, caring, mutual relationships where you don't have this happening, but you have an equal exchange of time and caring and loving, then the relationship is valuable. The relationship is loving. And so in that regard, it's definitely worth having and worth pursuing. So probably one of the biggest that I see in the clinic is people who have had relationships they didn't even recognize weren't true relationships. And so what it's done is it's created, psychologically, it's created a huge burden in their life, a huge burden, and a burden of guilt, because this is another aspect of relationships that are more like this than this, is these individuals here, they will try to tell you up is down and down is up. And so if you don't do everything they want, they will try to inject guilt into your heart, even though you may not be guilty of anything, but this is just the mechanism of the way they work. And so again, you see it is very common in like an abusive relationship. When I say abusive, there are levels of abuse, and sometimes it's physical abuse, Sometimes it's mental abuse, and sometimes it's really heavy, and sometimes it's a little milder. But you've got to be on the lookout for people who try to coerce your choices and to hijack your choices using fear, anger, and other emotions that are not love, right? Because true love is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? And so if you aren't a narcissist, you would have people that respected and honored your time, that loved you, that they cared equally or mutually about you, that would be just as willing to give to you as you would be willing to give to them. Like, that's how relationship works. And so many people are in relationships that don't work that way, and those are not relationships, right? Those are emotional roller coasters and the opposite of love. So I would encourage all of you to kind of think about where you're at in this world, and think about where you're at, going back to what we first started talking about, which is first step in all of this is to be honest and truthful to yourself about where you're at, so that you can move forward, again, in an intelligent, loving way that's not being shaped by your limbic emotional brain that just doesn't make great decisions. So let's dive into your questions. Let's see here. So one question coming in: why do intestinal pains sometimes radiate to my lower back? Because your low back and your intestines share the same nerve distribution. So the nerves that come off of your spinal cord, they feed your intestines as well as feeding your low back, and we call that referred pain patterns, right? We see the same thing happen when somebody's having a heart attack. They get their heart has an attack or has a lack of blood flow, and so what do we see? We see radiating pain down the arm. The arm's not hurt, it's the heart. But we see a referred pain pattern, and it's the same thing a lot of times with inflammatory intestinal disorders like celiac or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. We'll see these individuals struggle aggressively with back pain. And it doesn't matter what an MRI says or what a doctor's x-ray says, if you've got a referred pain pattern from inflammatory damage from the food that you're eating, that pain will never go away no matter what you do until you address that, because again, it's referral pain. Okay. Oh, Elizabeth's asking, where do we send testimonials? So we put that email address up. That's glutenology@gmail.com. You make those attention to Jessica. She's in charge of going through those and filtering through those. So again, that's glutenology@gmail.com. See, why when I give up gluten do my eyes and mouth completely dry out? I mean, you're making the assumption that when you give up gluten, your eyes and mouth dry out. But if you also have candida, so maybe it's a defense mechanism of candida, but I would argue that there's something else going on. It may not even really actually relate to the gluten per se. And so this is where testing might be very valuable, Lavender, and that is where I would encourage you to read that last chapter in No Grain, No Pain. It talks about functional medicine testing and kind of what to look for and what to ask for. Best way, let's see here, is it possible to order delayed food sensitivity testing off of Gluten-Free Society? Almost. We're working out the final details. We're hoping by the end of the quarter we'll have it ready for folks to use. What can cause you to lose your voice for 2 weeks to a month and not have any other complaints? A lot of times so it could be food. It could be what's in the air. I've seen certain airborne allergens create it. I've seen certain new types of medications create loss of voice. I've seen certain nutritional deficiencies cause loss of voice. I've seen upper respiratory infections cause loss of voice. So there's a pretty long list of different things that it could be. You could wait it out. I mean, if that's the only thing you've got is like laryngitis, right, which is your voice is gone, you could wait it out, because a lot of times upper respiratory infections are what are known as self-limiting, meaning your immune system, given a little bit of time, will conquer it and will heal, the cords will heal and you'll be able to speak again. But that's, if it's progressing and it's not improving, that's where you'd probably want to get it looked at. Let's see. How does celiac disease connect with MS? I'm assuming you mean multiple sclerosis. They're both autoimmune conditions. We know that celiac can be caused by gluten. We know that MS, for many, can be triggered. Gluten can be one of the triggers. We also know that that some of the hallmarks of both diseases, celiac and MS, share a lot of the same nutritional loss or deficits. For example, vitamin B12 and vitamin D deficiency are extremely common in both of those conditions. And we know that the deficiency of B12 and vitamin D will create a chronic persistent inflammatory issue in the intestines of a celiac patient, making it hard for them to heal their gut lining. And we know that vitamin B12 and vitamin D deficiency in a patient with MS will make it very, very hard on them neurologically, because you actually require vitamin D and vitamin B12 to repair the myelin sheath that coats the nerves. And so that a lot of correlation between the two conditions. I like that. So that's good. So somebody chiming in, love is an energy force and is innate in all of us. Agreed. Love is the greatest power, and it is, if natural, the highest invisible food from the infinite for soul and body. Love that. Robert says love is a dangerous disease. I don't agree with that, Robert. I think we just agree to disagree. Angela, love is definitely healing. When I'm in love or loved, I'm happy and feel good. When I'm not loved, I get depressed, which is traumatic, and trauma can lead to autoimmune disease. No doubt about it. Is it normal to have folate deficiency after going gluten-free for a celiac person? Is it normal? It's not normal or abnormal. It's common. Folate deficiency is quite common in patients after going gluten-free, but also before going gluten-free. So I wouldn't say that you're going to become folate deficient as a result of going grain-free. Remember, grains are generally fortified with folic acid, which is a synthetic folate. So a lot of nutritionists would like to say, well, you got to eat grains because you need your folic acid. Well, you can get natural folates from a lot of foods, liver being one of them, green leafy vegetables being another. You don't need grain to accomplish that. So I think it's probably more common because of the damage and the inhibition of digestion and absorption caused by years of degradation to the intestines. Let's see here. Is it normal to, let's see, I answered that one. Adrenal fatigue issues, how to heal and lose weight that is getting worse and not losing, therefore causing more stress. Almost 40, mostly paleo. So adrenal fatigue's tricky. We're not going to be able to obviously answer that question comprehensively in tonight's show. It's a topic we're taking on here. I think it's a show topic here in the next few weeks. So you might want to just make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned. But I would say one of the biggest issues with adrenal fatigue, even if you're following like a paleo style diet, is there could be other things that you're being exposed to, whether food or chemical based, that are driving up your cortisol. Remember, cortisol is the hormone your adrenal glands produce in order to help you cope and adapt to environmental stress, but cortisol causes your blood sugar to elevate, leading to weight gain. And so it's very, very challenging to lose weight when you're being inflamed, again, by food-based reactions or by chemicals that you might be being exposed to from environmental things. Let's see here. Yeah, I agree with this. So we've got a comment. I think the majority of people have been brainwashed that drug surgery is the answer. Virus today is a perfect example. Diet, lifestyle has kept our species healthy and thriving over millions of years. No doubt about it. I mean, I know when I talked about vitamin D early on, during what they were calling the pandemic, I was investigated by the authorities for saying vitamin D is important. New York Post wrote a hit piece against me. I mean, you guys can go back. You probably remember, you can look at our archives, just how misleading the propaganda was just because I was talking about diet. as a means to healthy immune response. I mean, this whole thing's been an agenda to rape the bank accounts of folks and to shut down small business and transfer the largest transfer of wealth ever seen in the history of mankind as a result of the greed and the inadequacy of the bureaucracy that is what so many people, bow to their altar and worship. I absolutely agree. Let's see here. Opinion on eat right for your blood type. I think there's some truths to that. I don't agree with everything. I haven't seen it all pan out as clinically in my experience, but I think there's some truths to it. I think it's an intelligent read for sure. And Dr. Peter D'Adamo is a very, very smart guy. I think it's worth a read for anybody who's trying to navigate and understand diet better. But I'm a little partial to no grain, no pain. Again, obviously, my partiality to no grain, no pain comes from my 21 years of clinical experience and what I've seen work in people over time. Why do I have fluid in my knee that won't go away? Good question. You got to have it looked at. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you can have fluid. I have seen cases, some of the more common causes of fluidity retention in a knee is an potential initial trauma, and then there's a lack of motion after the trauma to really help the knee heal. A lot of times people sit, right, 8 hours a day at a desk. If you've had any damage at all to the knee and fluid starts to retain in the knee, the lack of motion and movement will make it almost impossible for the fluid to come out of the knee. You've got to have motion of the joint to basically have fluid regularity within the joint itself. You also might have, an intrinsic damage that's creating persistent inflammation. You might have a food allergen. You might be gluten sensitive. I mean, there are a number of different things that it could be. How do you determine the right dosage of supplements according to the person's weight? There's an art to that, Moriana. I mean, there certainly are generalized recommendations that you'll see, on a supplement bottle, for example. You'll see, take 1 or 2 capsules a day or take as your doctor prescribes. Unfortunately, most doctors know nothing about nutrition, so that tidbit is more of a CYA that companies will put on their logos or not on their logos, on their bottles, so that they don't have to give a direct answer. But I understand why. I mean, everybody's unique and different, and every situation is unique and different. I would say it's not so much determining dosage of supplements according to a person's weight. It's according to their condition, according to their history, according to what else they may be reactive to. So there's a lot of factors that go into trying to determine the dose, and it's not always just weight. So I would say, unless you're training, unless you are in this field and you are training because you are the person helping somebody understand how much they need to take, that question's a little bit too deep for what we can get into tonight. Can cervical instability mess with digestion? It can. It absolutely can. The question is it, right? It can, but is it? And so there are 3 kind of categorical areas that can affect digestion, 3 pillars, if you will. One is your physical frame, your physical structure, including your cervical spine. Number 2 is biochemical, and this has to do with what are you putting in, right? What are you putting in that has the ability to biochemically manipulate how your digestion is functioning, and that includes chemicals, that includes food, that includes medications and other things. And then the third is your mental or emotional status, right? And that if you're highly, highly stressed and you're in a sympathetic dominant state, your digestion is going to suffer. And so the real question is, where in those 3 areas do you need to be addressing your digestive issue? And it could be, for some people, it's all 3 areas. For some people, it's 1 of the 3. For others, it's 2 of the 3. Just depends. Can I get sick from someone that got vaccinated? I am not vaccinated. I have problems sleeping after I spend time with them. There's a lot of, I don't think there's a lot of research yet that's been published on vaccine shedding. Theoretically, it makes sense, and anecdotally, meaning we've heard in the groups of doctors that I stay in communication with, we have in a combined fashion, we have seen thousands of anecdotal cases of illness as a result of being exposed to somebody post-vaccine, especially within that first 2 weeks. Now, that being said, I can't say there's any published research that shows it, but it's always best to have caution, right? If that's something you're concerned about and somebody you love or care about or you're in a relationship with is deciding to get a vaccine and that's your concern, I would just say it's good to at least wait that 2-week window. Think of it as almost like somebody who gets a flu shot, where a lot of times they end up getting the flu. It's the same, kind of think of it almost in a similar fashion. Is it possible to have an autoimmune disorder triggered by stress and not gluten? It is. It is. It's possible. My experience, I'll just speak from my experience. I've not yet seen a case of autoimmune disease in 21 years of practice where gluten wasn't playing a major role. That's not to say there isn't one. It's just sharing my experience with you. Now, that being said, stress is a very common role as well. It's just rare that I see stress in a bubble create the full-blown spectrum of an autoimmune process. How many hours one must sleep if you're 49 years old or older? It's not an exact with that. I think more than anything, it's the proper time to try to go to sleep. There's a time frame of sleep where we heal and repair that you want to try to optimize. And that time frame is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And so anything longer on either side of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is ideal, right? Up to 8+ hours, depending on how much you exercise, depending on how much stress you're going through, depending on your overall health. So sleep requirements are not, just like diet requirements are not identical for everyone, neither are sleep requirements. Would I suggest to take Ultra Acid for every meal, even without meat? So this is a question coming from somebody asking about a supplement that I formulate called Ultra Acid. Ultra Acid is a digestive aid, and so it's taken to help to digest heavier proteins. And so it can be ideal to eat it, especially if you're going to eat a large quantity of meat before a meal. Taking the extra acid can be very, very beneficial and very helpful to support that proper digestion. Do you need to use it if you're not eating meat? It depends. It depends on the level of digestive aid your body could benefit from. So some people do really well taking it even without eating meat because they produce low levels of stomach acid and need a little bit of extra acid to help them digest even non-protein based meals. So it just depends on the individual. So when we're watching what we eat to make sure everything is as clean as it can be, how do we protect ourselves from the chemicals, chemtrails that continue to spray on us? I mean, the best way is to filter your air and filter your water. Filter your air, filter your water. If you have the means, grow your own food, and control as much of your exposure to what I say the mass production of society. The mass production is where you run the greatest degrees of risk. And we see this trend. This, in my opinion, is super alarming trend of demonizing beef, demonizing cows, cow farts as being the cause of global warming and the cause of the death of the planet, which is absolutely, utterly, scientifically, completely ridiculous. And anyone who espouses that, I would love them to come on the show and debate me. They're morons. And we could, in 5 seconds, we could discredit them as being pseudoscientific ignoramuses. I mean, that's as kind as I'll put it. But that whole scenario of the way our food has been poisoned, the way we've been poisoned, the way we've been told to take poisons for health, right? I mean, that's what I meant earlier by down is up and up is down. Most people believe that poison, drugs do not provide health. Behaviors are what shape and mold your body for the most part. How you behave, right? How you eat, sleep, drink, how you love, who you surround yourself with. I mean, there's numerous behaviors that if you control them well enough, your body will be adaptive, resilient, responsive, and healthy. But if you buy into, again, if you don't tell yourself the truth and you buy into the lie that that your body's not good enough, that God didn't create you in his image and make you good enough to be able to navigate this world, that's the ultimate lie, right? That's the ultimate lie is to convince the entire population that somehow we're not good enough, that God created us broken, and that we somehow need man's intervention to save us and to save our planet. Anyway, I don't want to get too political, because I know many of you may not see 100% eye to eye, and this is not the medium for that. How does or should my stool change when going gluten-free? It depends. So, gluten for some people causes diarrhea. For others, it can cause constipation. And, I've seen it improve the stool form in both directions, right? And so that's what I would look to. That your stool changes in a way where it's more consistent, where it's well formed, where it's normal, where it's a dark brown color, where you don't have mucus or blood in it. Like, that's ultimately what you would want to see happen if you had those abnormalities. Let's see. I have gastrointestinal metaplasia and reversible precancerous condition due to chronic gut inflammation. My question, what digestive enzyme protocol would you recommend for GI metaplasia? Well, first, I'd want to know why the GI metaplasia existed. So those of you that don't know, metaplasia means cellular change. So it's like a precancerous type of lesion. And then a lot of times in the intestine, if we're talking about the gut, specifically folate deficiency and calcium deficiency have been directly linked to the creation or the contribution of metaplasia in those cell lines. So, I mean, the first thing that I think I would do is having my nutritional status measured and checked, but also have my reactivity to different foods and chemicals measured and checked, so that you can adjust your diet appropriately, so that you can deal with that. Now, as far as a digestive enzyme protocol, you can take digestive enzymes, but that's not going to solve this issue, right? You really got to go to the core of why that issue exists. Now, digestive enzyme will be supportive of your digestion, but again, it won't solve that issue. My buddy went vegan, lost a ton of weight, but also became depressed, was given an SSRI. He was fine prior to that. I tried to explain it. Could be his diet, but he won't listen. How can I get through to him? I wish you could. I mean, ultimately, this is where, how do you get through to somebody who you love and care about who doesn't want to listen? Because we're all dealing with that, right? I mean, no matter what you believe, if you believe in, in COVID-19, if you believe in getting a shot or not getting a shot, right? It doesn't matter which side of that you're on. Ultimately, whatever you believe is what you believe, and trying to convince somebody else who's not willing to hear you and not willing to be convinced, in my opinion, is a waste of time. Remember that love is truth, and your truth starts right here by looking in the mirror and making your changes. So the only way you're going to do any convincing to anyone is you have to be the beacon. You have to be the shining light. You have to be the example, right, of the antithesis to what that person you care about is doing, so that when they're ready in their mind to accept the fact that they need help, or that they can challenge what they're currently doing in their own mind, they may or may not come to you. By the way, they may come to you. If they do come to you, you'll have the opportunity to lead them in the right direction. But you can't take somebody who's unwilling to change and unwilling to even acknowledge that the change is necessary. You can't take that person and convince them. You're not going to. You can only be a beacon of light, so that when they're ready, when their minds are ready and their hearts are ready to receive information and knowledge and make a change, that you're there for them, and you can, at that point, you can then begin to influence them. That's really, unfortunately, the only way you're going to bring change to anyone. Remember, there's a fundamental rule, it's a psychological law, if you will, and that is simply this: a person has their level of pain, no matter what the pain is, whether it's the pain of depression or the pain of physical joint pain or the pain of an illness that they struggle with that makes their life miserable, whatever the pain is, right? A person's level of pain has to far outweigh their fear of change. People fear change, fearing change, right? They fear change, and that's why they won't answer themselves honestly. They won't even question what they're currently doing, because the fear of change is very tremendous. And this is why the fear of a life of, really, if we really boil it down, it's the fear of, it's not the fear, it's when people get ready for this change, it's because they are in mourning. They're mourning their life's potential. They're mourning, psychologically, they're mourning the death of themselves. They're mourning the death of what they are capable of bringing into the world. So they're mourning the loss of their own light, of their own internal light. And they're living but mourning at the same time. And that's what creates the depression. But again, this has to become greater than their fear of change for them to be able to open their ears to hear your message and to hear your word. If they're not at that place, there's no amount of convincing that you're going to do. And so that's, I say that because, look, I deal with it too all the time. I mean, you guys tune in and you've been watching me, some of you for years, some of you are new to the show. But look, I have direct blood family relatives that don't listen. And I can't convince them, and it's not my job to try to convince them. I love them, and I honor their ability to have free will, and I love them and respect them to the level that I respect the decisions that they want to make to lead their life and be in their own body. I just don't own their decisions, right? And that's where a lot of family, it's where it gets tough with family and personal friends that you love, is that a lot of times you want to step in and be a hero. People want to step in and be a hero, but the only person that's going to be anyone's hero is God and themselves, right? And they have to have that conversation in their heart to be able to step forward to make that change. And if they're not willing to do that, you can be supportive, but your role in supporting them is going to be to support them in making the same decisions that they're already making. Because if you try to convince them of doing something different and they don't see eye to eye with you, you're going to ruin the relationship. You're going to destroy the potential future chance to help that individual, because you're going to create such a dissension within the relationship that they no longer want to talk to you. And that's just God's honest truth. Let's see here. I heard that B vitamins are cultured on yeast. 1, is that true? How is your B complex cultured? And 3, if you have yeast candida overgrowth, do B complexes contribute to this problem? So a lot to unpack there. Some are cultured on yeast and some are not. Remember that a lot of the natural B vitamins we get from different types of microorganisms, whether they be bacteria or yeast. That doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, meaning if something's cultured from yeast, it doesn't necessarily make it bad. It's still a bioavailable form of the nutrient. Let's see, where'd the rest of that question go, because it was multi-part. And if you have yeast candida overgrowth, do B complexes contribute to the problem? Not generally, no. Generally, no. Where we see B complexes contribute to the person's problem as it relates to yeast overgrowth is generally as if they're living in mold. If there's a environmental mold issue that they're struggling with, and so when you're in environmental mold, what happens is you can't get rid of candida because the mold externally produces mycotoxins that suppress your immune system. And so if you've got, and all of us do, we have some degree of yeast growing in us. It's called our microbiome. Then what happens is that microbiome gets out of control and it overgrows. And when you take B vitamins, especially the methylated versions of B vitamins, what you do is you amp up detoxification pathways. And so that mobilizes mycotoxins and it creates more of a detoxification reaction, but it doesn't necessarily make a yeast overgrowth worse. How do we get back our sense of taste and smell after recovering from a cold or flu? I mean, hands down, in my experience, there's 3 things you can do. Number 1 is zinc. And anywhere between, I've seen anywhere between 25 and 100 milligrams of zinc be effective at doing that. Number 2 is quercetin, because quercetin drives the zinc into the cells. So combining zinc and quercetin is a good thing. Remember, your taste and smell are dependent upon zinc. Zinc drives that process. And then number 3 is retrain your smell. And one of the best ways to retrain your smell is to smell different things. So a lot of people, we find that's beneficial for them is using different essential oils. So for example, eucalyptus and peppermint, and just going through different oils and doing deep breathing, smelling activity where you're trying to basically retrain and reactivate your olfactory receptors. So those are the 3 things that I would recommend that you try to do. I've had people write me and say that within days of using quercetin, their smell came back. I don't see that for everyone. So I don't want to tell everybody here listening that that's the catch-all and the ultimate, cure, if you will, for everyone's loss of smell. But I've had a number of people write me saying, using our Ultra Q, that their smell returned rather quickly. So those are my experiences. What's the best meal to break a 3-day fast? Best meal, a liquid meal, something kind of either liquid or pureed. So again, making it easy for your gut to bring food back in without just shocking it back into a major food fest. Will my wife be angry at us tonight for talking to us tonight instead of taking her out to dinner? No, because we don't go out to eat. I mean, like, we eat at home. I mean, I practice what I preach, right? So no, but she will appreciate me not going too long tonight. So thanks for the reminder. I took a DNA genome test. It shows the genetic basis, gluten sensitivities, risk genes, HLA-DQ1, 238, but no risk for HLA-DRBs and risk for farinins, globulins, purines. What are these last 3? Those are different forms of proteins found in grain that people can react to. But if you took that test where they were measuring those proteins, I can just tell you that test methodology is not very accurate. My experience, and I won't say the name of the lab, but I know the lab you used, not a great lab in that regard. So been taking Histassist for allergies. It helps a lot, but started nosebleeds every a few weeks for a few months now. Wondering if any supplements can cause blood thinning or something else. The biggest, in my experience, the biggest supplements that can cause nose bleeding, not so much the stuff in Histassist, but like vitamin E, high doses of vitamin E, high doses of ginkgo, high doses of omega-3 fatty acids have all been shown to thin the blood, and for some can cause spontaneous nose bleeding, intermittent spontaneous nose bleeding. Can shoulder pain be as a result of trauma, left abusive relationship 3 months ago and going through divorce? It can be. People will store their emotional pain in their joints, and so it certainly is a possibility. This is why sometimes like massage and chiropractic and other forms of physical modality care can be such great relievers. People tend to hold their stress within their shoulders, and so those types of physical therapies can be very, very relieving in that regard. Why is it harder for PCOS patients to lose weight? Because PCOS is a form of diabetes, and nobody's told you that probably, and so you didn't know it, and so you're probably approaching your weight loss all wrong because you're probably over-consuming carbs as a general rule of thumb. That's just a generalization. Can gluten intolerance cause dysautonomia? Yes, it sure can. Let's see here. When they get bad enough, they will listen. In the meantime, just love them. Yeah, that's true. I think that's just a reiteration of what I said earlier. I think that's a big important part too, though, to that equation, what we're talking about. And maybe a good way to wrap tonight up is just to say, look, if you love somebody who's struggling right now, and they're not open in their hearts to listen, and they're not open in their hearts yet to change, just remember this: it's not your burden. It's not your burden to carry. Their detriment, their poor health is not your burden to carry. It's not your fault. You can't blame yourself for not convincing them better, right? A lot of people find themselves in this kind of framework, again, of guilt for not being able to help that individual. Remember, this is why I go, again, not to be too political, but this is why I hate communism. Because communism falls under the premise that it's everybody's job to take care of everybody, and then it's nobody's job to take care of themselves, right? Is that the whole will take care of the individual, but the individual has no self-serving responsibility to do their own self-love and to take care of themselves. And so everybody in that model, everybody just thinks everybody else is going to do the work so they can sit back and coast on everyone else's shoulders, and it never works. It just doesn't work that way. You have to take ownership of what is yours, right? Give to God what is God's. Give to yourself what belongs to you, which is your own choices, your own freedom of the ability to make your own decisions. But respect others enough that they have that same capacity and that same ability, and that you can't take ownership of their choices, because if you try to, it will eat you alive. The stress will eat you alive, and it will destroy your health in the process. So all that being said, I know we got more questions, but it is 15 after and it is Valentine's. So forgive me for wrapping it up and going home to spend some time with my wife and my family. And just want to say I love you all. And thank you for spending part of your Valentine's evening with me. I'll see you back here next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Take care.